Hey, I'm Liv, and I like making stuff. Today we're gonna paint rocks and learn about where cornflakes came from. So let's get on with it. So everyone and their dog has been painting rocks lately. I want to paint some rocks. I'm going to paint some for some neighbors for the holidays, and I thought I'd bring you along for it. But that would be pretty boring, just watch me paint. So we're going to learn about where cornflakes came from. I started Googling the word why, and why were cornflakes invented was the first thing to pop up. So initially I was like, why were cornflakes invented? Why were cornflakes invented? And the story is pretty interesting. Okay, we're going to paint a couple paw prints, because my neighbors like dogs, and a couple hearts because I don't know what they like, and that's pretty generic, and a balloon because my neighbor does balloon twisting. I think that's what it's called. Let's start with a heart. That seems simple. Ooh, that comes out quickly. I have two different kinds of pens, by the way. These are paint pens. I got big chunky ones and little fine ones. The little fine ones I just got recently, so I haven't tried them before. I'll link them down below. But anyway, so when I saw that prompt, why were cornflakes invented, I got really excited because I didn't know why. And as I started reading about it, it's a pretty fantastical story. So I went over to my husband and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do this video on why were cornflakes invented. And he was like, oh, I know why. And he acted like this is just a normal thing. So do you know why? Is this common knowledge? If it is, please let me know down below. But we should get started. So our story starts with John Harvey Kellogg. And this was on February 26th in 1852. That's when he was born, very long time ago. John Harvey was an American medical doctor, a nutritionist, an inventor, a health activist, a businessman. This all sounds good, right? And also a eugenicist. We're gonna get to that part. So he was a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I got pink on myself, oh well. And he was sort of groomed by the church. I'm not really sure why, but they groomed him to be a leader, gave him all sorts of advantages and training. Well, I'm so glad I just filled in this entire heart with this fine point pen. So then in 1876, he took over this church-founded health institution. Perfect guy for the job. This was in Battle Creek, Michigan. So he called it the Battle Creek Sanatorium, go figure, and turned it into this world-renowned facility. Did I say sanatorium? It's sanitarium. I think at the time, sanatorium was like for mental health, and sanitarium might have been a term that he coined, but I'm not sure about that part. So this sanitarium, it kind of combined a whole bunch of different things, like the vibe of a European spa, a hydrotherapy institution, a hospital, and even a high-class hotel. So this was like a really fancy place. But it said that he didn't only serve wealthy people, it was poor people as well. I don't know if this is a out of the goodness of his own heart thing, or if it's like, we gotta fix them poor people kind of thing. Let's get some purple. So anyways, he described this system, this whole place, as a composite physiologic method comprising hydrotherapy, phototherapy, thermotherapy. Has anyone watched Nurse Ratched? Some of this is making me think of that. It's on Netflix. Electrotherapy, mechanotherapy, I'm not sure about that one. Dietetics, physical culture, cold air cure, health training, and eugenics. And when I say eugenics, that's the selective breeding stuff, like the Nazis, right? Bad stuff there, right? But this dude, he kind of had free reign back then. Ooh, that came out fast. So at some point, John and the church had this huge falling out. Not really sure why, but he kind of embodied a lot of the principles that they had. He was vegetarian, which apparently is a big part of that, and abstinent, even though he was married. Abstinent. And he also promoted abstinence, which is going to become important in a bit. So the church abandoned this facility, but John kept going. So now it was him running the place solo. So John was a major leader in general health reform. I mean, some of the stuff that he was into is pretty cool. Like, he was a proponent for actually working out and being healthy. But he was also big into the second phase of the clean living movement. That was all about anti-drugs, anti-tobacco, anti-drinking. You know, the whole Great Gatsby thing. Champagne is the legal underground kind of stuff. Clean eating and eugenics were part of that. according to John. So interestingly, the United States, and to some lesser degree, the United Kingdom and other sort of Western European cultures have had these kind of intense healthcare, health reform systems about once every 80 years. I feel like that could be a whole video all on its own. Like why is that happening? And I mean, I'm sure we can all guess, you know, the waxing and waning of certain things going on based on what's happening in society, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, let's get some white. No, the stone is white. Let's not. I think yellow would be delightful. Actually, let's move on to the next stone because I'm going quite slowly. Okay, so Johnny Boy, he was super into this whole biologic living, which is what he called it. It sort of combined scientific theory and his Seventh-day Adventist beliefs. Promoted health reform, temperance, and sexual abstinence, right? And in some ways, his mentality was extremely current by today's standards because he was all into the gut microbiome. Intestinal flora, you know, being kind to your body. I mean, the gut microbiome, it's all very hip nowadays, right? We're understanding so much more. And he seemed to be really into that and have a pretty good understanding. But some of the ways that he enacted this with his patients was very questionable. So he promoted an all-vegetarian diet. He believed in food that promoted bowel movements, multiple bowel movements a day. So he was always messing around with vegetarian stuff, with wheat, you know, that kind of stuff that keeps you regular. There was a kitchen at the sanitarium, and that was where he did a lot of experimentation on his patients. Experimentation sounds a little wacko, but I'm sure at the time it was like, here's what's on the menu today, let's see if you poop a lot kind of thing. I don't know. So now enters little brother Willie. Willie Keith Kellogg. Willie Keith Kellogg, he was back home, still in Battle Creek, but working at their father's business. It was a broom company. And Willie actually dropped out of school at a pretty young age to help work in this factory. I mean, I guess it was pretty common around that time. And by the age of 13, he was even going to local grocery stores and selling the brooms to them. Just like a little 13-year-old salesman. Can you imagine that these days? I would guess we have 13-year-old influencers. But anyways, so little Willie was doing this until about 1880. So he was 20 years then. He was ripe old age of 20, been selling stuff for 7 years. So John says, hey Willie, come work for me at the sanatorium. I need some help out here. Some people make these dot art pieces look so pretty. We're having fun, right? Okay. Willie goes to work for John at the sanatorium, but John is not the nicest dude to work for. Willie is really poorly paid. The hours are crazy. He's doing all sorts of odd jobs like janitorial stuff, handyman stuff. He's also John's assistant. And there's some reports about like really extreme stuff that he has to do, like take notes while John's on the toilet and all sorts of stuff. But I'm not super sure about all of it, but it doesn't sound like he was the nicest dude. And he kind of lorded his success over his little brother, right? John's biggest kick was to try and develop anaphrodisiac foods for his patients, which is literally the opposite of aphrodisiac. He wanted to turn them off. A lot of the food that he created in his kitchen, his test kitchen, was actually something he went on to market later. And this was under the name the Sanitest Food Company. That was sort of like their kitchen company. Doesn't it make you wonder what other effect did he have on food that's out these days? Because, I mean, we all know the Kellogg Company, right? So is there other crazy food flying around that we don't know the weird origin or intent of? Anyways, so he was messing around with oats and wheat and all that stuff that promotes pooping. And here's where a whole bunch of mystery comes in. The story goes that it's 1898. John and Willie have been working together for a long time, or rather Willie's been working for John. It's been a hard going 19 years, right? They're working in the kitchen one night and they leave out a batch of this wheat oat concoction, the kind of thing that John loves to feed to people, get them regular. So they leave it out and it's left out too long. Some say they were taken away to more pressing business. Some of the stories even involve Ella, John's wife. I'd love to give her credit for that too. But ultimately, it seems that both John and Will were involved in leaving out this stuff, coming back to find that it was bad, fermented, or just not necessarily usable. And then they decided to roll it out and see if they could use it, and it flaked into cornflakes. Well, it wasn't corn initially. They found out later that corn made it crisper and more crunchy, so they used corn in the end. At the time, it was like a wheat flake thing. Ultimately, it was a Kellogg family discovery. John was super psyched about this. He thought this was great. His patients liked it, so he gave it to all his patients, sort of willy-nilly told them about it, was super excited about it, even to the point that one of the patients stole the recipe. I mean, it was sort of like, hey, I tried this thing, and the patient was like, And it doesn't even sound like it was a big theft. It was just like, this is what he ate for breakfast. And then he took that recipe and started marketing it. And that turned into Post cereals. Willie, however, was trying to be far more shrewd about this. He thought that this was totally marketable. He was really pissed that John wasn't protecting this recipe. Kind of feels like Willie had some sort of ownership in this and pride in it. So Willie kept pushing for them to market this properly. John wasn't really doing it the way he wanted. Obviously, they must have had some kind of crazy relationship if John was the kind of person that he sounds like he was. And then it all came to a head when Will wanted to put sugar in the flakes. He thought that that would make it more palatable to the general public. I mean, John was not having it because that is not on his whole healthy gut bacteria, no enjoyment sort of eating regime. So all of this amounted to Willie breaking off and taking the patent and making it for himself. And he did really, really well. Of course, I mean, he did amazingly well. And John was pissed. All of a sudden, here is his little brother being super successful, putting sugar in the stuff that is totally bastardized now. It was John's healthy thing, and then now Willie's just, I keep saying Willie, but he made a big deal about turning it into Will. So his name is Will, was Will. So anyways, Will is running around selling this thing, making it all unhealthy. John was pissed, and he started selling his own. And the next good chunk of years is this brotherly battle between the brothers. Kellogg brother battle. Battle of the Kellogg's? Corn Crusade, I don't know. This big battle over the cornflake. It seemed that Will was definitely better at marketing. He did a whole bunch of advertising campaigns, and he ended up making a slogan that went on the box that said, "The original bears this signature," followed by W.K. Kellogg in his handwriting. And ultimately, Will sued John and won. And now Kellogg's are where they are in most households. Many households. I know that growing up in South Africa, cornflakes was one of the few cereals that we had because we didn't have a whole bunch like here. It's looking a little weird, isn't it? So you can probably tell that I'm happy about little Willie winning the lawsuit. And I am, and I will tell you why. So we've already seen that John Kellogg was a pretty awful dude, right? He had some good ideas, but some really awful ones. And if you look up a lot of other videos, you'll hear a lot about his abstinence sort of stuff. And there's some bad stuff, but something that became his passion for the next 30 years of his life, very specifically, was his eugenics. And he spent pretty much the rest of his life promoting this. I don't know if it's he lost the cereal battle, so I guess I'll work on being a racist or something. Either way, he even founded this thing called the Race Betterment Foundation. I know, it's as awful as it sounds. It was all about promoting racial hygiene, discouraging racial mixing. He thought that there was racial degeneration happening, is what he called it. He even served on the Michigan Board of Health. This crazy racist dude, served on the Michigan Board of Health, like someone making decisions. That's why we gotta be careful about who we elect to public office. Anyway, so he fought for and received authorization to sterilize people that were deemed mentally defective. And I don't know if that was just him deeming that or if there was a board, we can trust boards clearly. So he was literally in favor of sterilizing anyone who was labeled as mentally defective. He was literally a villain. I mean, you could just write the movie around this guy and you'd have the perfect villain. Will, by contrast, seemed to do some really good stuff, which is interesting coming from the same family. And who knows if it's because he was tortured by his brother, which by some accounts it sounds like he was, or maybe he was just a nice guy. Now, I don't know if he was a nice guy, and by some accounts he was not a pleasant guy. He was a really difficult boss, he was a cold guy, but he was also said to be extremely charitable and very caring. I know, kind of a contrast, cold and caring, but that can be the case. His company was even one of the first to put nutrition labels on food, which is crazy to think about now, going in blind. Imagine if someone says like back when you could sort of trust advertising or people didn't know. Like, have you seen that movie, The Invention of Lying, where no one lies and then Ricky Gervais, I think it is, figures out how to lie and he has this great monopoly? It's almost like, was that what it was like back then? That these companies figured out how to lie in advertising and twist this marketing and say, this is healthy for you. No offense, Will, but like this sugar-laden breakfast thing that's healthy for you makes me think of Invention of Lying. Anyways, so he was one of the first to put nutrition labels on his food so people actually knew what was in there. Hopefully they could understand it, but he even created a child welfare foundation and donated $66 million to it. I'm not quite sure what years he donated that, like if it was cumulative, but that's a lot of money nowadays even, you know? He paid better than average wages, and during the Great Depression, he even mandated that people work in 6-hour shifts. So they had 4 6-hour shifts every day so that more people had a chance to get work and be paid, which is pretty amazing. He loved horses so much that he even bred Arabian horses, and he had a 750-acre horse ranch that he donated to the University of California. It was donated to multiple different places and sort of changed hands over the years, but ultimately he donated this place. I don't even know what 750 acres looks like. Apparently some of his horses were used in movies, so I think if you Googled it, you could go see the horses that used to belong to little Willie Kellogg. Well, I barely finished any stones. We have a balloon one starting here, a little paw print, a heart, and we're all done with our story. So I'm gonna go finish these rocks. I will pop back in to show you what they look like, and we can finish this all up. All right, I'm done. I guess I don't have the patience for this stuff necessarily. Kind of had some disasters, but hopefully my neighbors appreciate this stuff, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun doing this. This was kind of weird, talking about trivia and something new and interesting while trying to do something creative. If you liked this video, if you found this fun, interesting, informative, whatever, I do hope you hit subscribe down below. Let me know what you thought, because this was a fun, interesting, different kind of thing for me. I've never done anything like this. I had a great time learning all the history and the origin of cornflakes, and it was really fun and interesting for me, so hopefully you enjoyed it too. If you did, let me know with a thumbs up, and I will know to make another one of these. And if you have a suggestion, a request, or a recommendation for the next video, leave it down below. Wherever you are, I hope you're having the best day that you possibly can. Be kind to the people around you, and keep making stuff.